Uncaged podcast. First of all, I warn you now, the language that you're going to hear is native Brooklyn speak. We're going to be spitting out all types of Brooklyn lingo from like the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, because we have a serious problem today. The person that I'm talking to, she is a female counterpart of myself. We need to check our DNA charts to see if it's anywhere in our ancestry, if we have the same bloodline. Because when we got on the horn for the first time last week, it was like kindred spirits coming together for the first damn time.
I
So
know.
it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a
You
problem.
know, as Black people, bro, we're all cousins.
Yeah, but I think we're a little bit closer than that. Like I mean, like we're
Yeah.
everyone that's listening right now, you're going to see a serious problem. That's all I have to say, right? So, Vonti, I like to give nicknames to whoever I'm interviewing. So your nickname is going to be the filmmaker boss for obvious reasons, but the people that may not even know who you are, I want you to kind of tell them a little bit more about you and what would you like to talk about today?
Oh my goodness. How far back do we go? From birth, or is it like,
It's up
you
to you.
know?
Up to you.
No, so my name is Vonti McRae. And first of all, Mr. Grant, Mr. The boss Uncaged. I really appreciate you bringing me on to your podcast. As a fellow podcaster myself, I love being able to connect with people. And like you said, we have so much in common. So, but to get into it really quickly though, I was born in Brooklyn, New York and everything, did that extra year in high school because I did not know what I wanted to do with my life, failing out miserably, had that 1.9 GPA. And then I realized early on that no one else is going to help me survive but myself, right? So I ended up going to college and everything, got into mass comm, broadcast news, over at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. Literally senior year, I said, this is not what I want to do. I do not want to ambulance chase. I don't want to go up to somebody's door, knock on it and say, how do you feel about your son who just got shot up? That was not something that I felt based on where I even came from to add more trauma to my life as somebody that was in that news field. So I ended up switching up gears, always been a creative writer, and I went to the Academy of Art to get my master's degree in screenwriting. So I have an MFA in screenwriting. And after all of that, going to San Francisco, which was crazy, I said, well, we have to go to the West Coast, get to where we need. We got to go to LA. So I literally went to LA broke. I had no money. A friend of mine referred me over to this Black gentleman who said, all right, I'm going to take a chance on you with your jobless self, and I'm going to rent this place to you since you have the funds up front. I spent a year hopping around LA doing what anybody does, grinding like crazy, and ended up getting a temp job over at Sony Pictures. And I said, as a Black woman, once they open that door, even an inch, I wasn't going to let them close it ever until they had to drag me up out of there. So I spent 3 years over at Sony Pictures and Home Entertainment as a business analyst, project manager, just churning out titles after titles. And then I decided to move back to New York, came back to Brooklyn where I knew, licked my wounds from LA because it was a beast in my 20s to be out there by myself, with no kind of real support and just meeting people and just trying to make a way. Came back to New York and ended up landing at HBO, where I spent 9 years doing something similar to at Sony, releasing over 1,000 titles. I was there at HBO for 9 years, released Game of Thrones to home entertainment, DVD, Blu-ray, digital streaming, put it up there for the Emmy nominations, just ran a lot of the creative teams as far as what you do in project management, be in the middle of everything, that shitstorm. And fast forward into today after HBO, I said, do I want to get into this? Do I want to still be into it? I pivoted over to healthcare education. And after that, I was able to, after I did the healthcare education stuff, I said it wasn't for me. I need to get back into the creative. I need to follow my passion over, the things that had happened previously to me, and I'm ready to do it again. I came back even stronger. And now I have a podcast called Vonti Talks with Filmmakers, where I literally do it as an educational podcast to mentor people from a distance on who those people are behind the cameras. Everybody wants to interview the celebrities. I actually interview the cinematographers, the gaffers, the grips, people that you wouldn't even know what their position is, and really break it down so people understand you don't have to go into one path of filmmaking. There's so many jobs. So when y'all see those credits roles at the movies and you get your happy self up, those are individual names of hardworking people that are supporting that film and worked hard to bring it to the screen. So I'm still screenwriting. I'm a producer. I do acquisitions. I'm just in it all, man. Swimming upstream, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, being from Brooklyn, this is a traditional thing from the '90s. You would always say like you have more jobs than a Jamaican. So I want you to kind of
Oh,
like understand that, right? Like
oh my
again,
God.
it's embedded in us as being New Yorkers. Is like you always have more than one title. So I want
Yeah.
you to kind of like talk about like the experience at HBO and working on like large shows, like you mentioned. Like, what did that do not only for you as a Black female, but what did it do for your career in a whole?
Well, again, it was one of those spaces where diversity was very limited. When I first came into HBO Home Entertainment, there was like a Black president who had a Black executive assistant. It was a lot of us sprinkled in throughout. So that was my first time of really coming to a place where I seen more people of myself there, right? So it was amazing to be in that space. So I worked on titles like Game of Thrones before Game of Thrones was even released. We were trying to figure out what would this look like in Best Buy, Walmart, Target, and everything. What strategically can we do to hit those dates? So there was a lot of challenges. So it's like if we say this is coming out on Black Friday and three different teams have not gotten all the creative assets, what can I do as a project manager to get us back on track? Who can I negotiate with? Can we expedite things? So it was being in the middle of everything. And I think that was the most exciting, the velocity of it, right? So it was either sink or swim for a lot of my roles. Even over at Sony Pictures, yes, you got templates and process documents, but a lot of the times it was, are you good enough for this role and can you do this? And you immediately knew within 30 days of being at these jobs, right? Because you're dealing with a high level brand that is a multi-billion-dollar brand that is well respected, and you're saying, I'm going to get this product to market. That put a lot of pressure on me, man, a lot. And then different personalities and all of that stuff. So yeah, but it was an exciting time. There was a lot of things I got to do, man. Game of Thrones, Insecure, Ballers, even The Wire when they repackaged it on Blu-ray for the first time. I mean, it was some crazy stuff happening behind the scenes, man. But it just made me a stronger person, I could say that. And after leaving post HBO, I realized doing those healthcare education webinars that it does not matter the product. If you say, Vonti, I want you to create bolts on a spaceship, how can we do that? And I would be able to literally run the teams that are in charge of that. And it took me being at after HBO to learn that I actually know my stuff. So
Wow. Wow. So I mean, obviously, I mean, on that journey, there's always some kind of mentor that can help you. So I want you to kind of like bring up Rich, because I've seen like you were chilling with Rich, were at Netflix, you guys are having a great
yeah.
time. Like, how much has that affected your career as well, working with Rich, and then now how are you using what you learned from him to help mentor other people through your podcast?
Oh my goodness. So let me tell you one thing. Growing up where I came from, like in the hood and everything, and even when I was raised by my grandmother in the South, you're not taught to go find mentors. You're not taught a lot of things. We come from inner city where books are ripped apart and you know what I mean? They're giving you stuff with the thread showing on the book and everything. People not really caring if you graduate or not. And that was something I had my guidance counselor when I was in high school say, why don't you just drop out and go get a GED? Because you're pretty much worthless. And these are people that were supposed to help. So to find a mentor so late in my career, yes, I look young, but I'm actually in my mid 40s, people. And it was many years and I did not realize that. Nobody from film school told me that. Nobody when I was going for my master's degree say, hey, make sure you go and get a mentor. It was none of those things. It was like fight to get on these short films and everything, but nothing about like going to get a mentor. So to give you guys some backstory, and I know Rich is tired of hearing this story, but when this episode comes out, I'm definitely going to let him know. I was actually on an episode of Wipeout, the TV show, many moons ago, and Rich Least was actually the producer of Wipeout. So when I met him, he was already so engaging and respectful that I kept in touch with him over the years. And when I say when you do mentorship, you don't just ask them for a job or ask them to do things for you. It is literally could you give me input on if I did this right? And that was what Rich was my sounding board, and he has been for many years to this day. If you look at my podcast, Vonti Talks, he's actually came on the podcast. This is the director of unscripted casting at Netflix, who has literally sent hundreds of shows to market. And he was willing to come on an unknown podcast that just launched last July. So mentoring is very important, especially to educate yourself. Find somebody that is smarter than you. Find somebody that is more experienced than you. Find somebody that knows more and ask them to give you those answers. And especially as a minority, we don't do that enough. So don't ever be embarrassed. Don't ever feel insecure about yourself. Don't ever feel like you know everything. Ask for that help because there are people out there that want to train you. So that is something that has helped me with my podcast. I say it is mentoring virtually. That's what I consider it. Virtual mentoring by established filmmakers.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, see, I think part of it is like, you've worked in education, right? You
Mhm.
understand mentoring. You're really big into like the media, movies, and television. But
Mhm.
you mentioned having a master's degree, and your master's degree is in communication and media studies. Like, obviously, I think by default, it makes sense why you got that degree. But what was the real reason? Considering that you were in the industry, you could have probably learned by doing. Why did you decide to jump in and get a master's?
Well, just to correct you really quick, I have my undergrad is in mass comm because I want to make that clear. And then the grad is actually in film. So it's a master of fine art in film education and stuff. The reason why I did that and just be very transparent, it's been a challenge to be a Black person, right? But it's been even more of a challenge to be a Black filmmaker in this space. And I didn't want to give them not one reason why they could not let me in the door. And a lot of times with jobs, at these different studios or whatever, they want you to be educated. I mean, even at HBO, there's a program where you have to have an MBA just to do an internship, So that's leaving out a lot of people. I'm sure they have other programs, so I'm not knocking HBO for that, but there's people in the mailroom that have master's degrees. So they're literally dropping off mail to different cubicles with a master's degree. That if that's not humbling yourself and really being hungry for this industry, I don't know what is. So that's pretty much what it was. I never wanted them to say, you do not have the credentials to do this, even though they still said no.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think being faced with the no is all part of media, right? I mean, I think
Yes.
like just hearing no by default, even in networking, like no is something that you just hear by default, no matter who it is, unless you have like that synergy right off bat, and even that may still lead to a no, right? So
Yes.
that's your media side, and then you have another love and another passion for AI, which kind of
Yes.
jumped off as well. So I want you to kind of talk about like what is your passion about AI? How does that then work with what you're doing right now with media?
Oh my goodness. I get so excited about this because AI has been like, it's just exciting, right? So I've always been one of those people when I go into jobs, they always have some new kind of tech or some new kind of software that I have to learn. And over the years, since I've been, working in corporate spaces since I was 16, I always picked up on it fast. So you could be like, oh, this program does this, boom, boom, boom. We're doing distribution, supply chain, da da da. It just took no time for me, right? So when AI came out, I immediately jumped into the Chat GPT stuff, right? But then I went down the rabbit hole very quickly because I feel like with AI right now, everybody is throwing out all of these AI applications, but nobody is making it transferable to the everyday person. So what I did was create a company called We Teach AI, which is literally we go and do master classes, customized classes, one-on-one training, workshops, and everything to teach you AI in a transferable way. Right now, people are making it very overwhelming for you to understand. But what I can tell you is there's apps out there that will build you a website in 30 seconds, that will make you a PowerPoint presentation just from you copy and paste it in your outline, and we'll pull copyright free images and everything, and even the template and the color scheme, right? So those things are not only making it easier for your day to day, but it makes you concentrate more on what might be more important. Right. And then as a small business or a startup, I feel like we don't definitely have the capital. So that's really why I got into AI. It's like they have so many cost savings apps out there that people have no clue even exist. So anytime I get the opportunity, I'm telling people this app does this app does that, this app does that. But doing it in a way where it's a suite of products, right? I think the last time when we had spoken, I let you know, I feel like you can't just say, oh, look at this shiny little app. Oh, ChatGPT over here. It's like, how do they put that into their workflow? So what I do is say a suite of products from start to finish. When you're starting up a business, you need the EIN number, you need the business bank account, you need all of these moving parts, but you also need a logos, website, SEO. It's like a long list of stuff, domain names, customer service assistants and all of that stuff. I look at all of these different apps and have vetted over 50 of them and look into which ones could be most functional for people. But I teach it in layman's terms. So like if you wanted to open up Word and Word was new to you, you don't need to hear words like embed codes and all of that stuff and algorithms and stuff. You just want to know, click new, click open, what the template is and how to utilize that. So I try and teach it in the most simplest terms for people to understand.
So let's play devil's advocate, right? I mean, obviously, you're on one side, you're really big into the industry. On the other side, you're really big into AI, and like AI is kind of like taboo to a certain extent in industry because some producers and some actors are scared about being replaced. And
Yeah.
obviously, I think that you see the utility of it and how that can benefit the industry. So let's say I'm an executive producer, and you're coming to me talking about creating, for example, music by AI or
Mhm.
leveraging AI technology to create motion backgrounds. Like, how are you going to sell that, considering that that may replace the jobs of people in the industry?
So what I would tell people is this, right? We will not be going backwards, right? So when DVDs and Blu-rays came out, VHS was annihilated. When CDs came out, tapes were done, right? When there was a thing where there were no laptops and it was just desktops, right? Technology, once it gets here, it's not reversing, right? But what you need to do is figure out a way to customize it for yourself. I'm not saying that we should utilize right now AI music and all of this stuff and images and get rid of folks and all of that stuff. I'm not saying all of that. You have your own ethics. For me, I won't be using it to write scripts because I enjoy writing in the creative process. There's a lot that goes into it, and there's nobody that can come into my brain, especially on the machine, and really know how to engage with those people. I always tell people screenwriters are the first people to utilize virtual reality.
Mm.
So you're supposed to drop into the scene. You drop into that world. You are the person that is world building. AI cannot do that. I don't care how many prompts you give it or anything like that. It's still going to give you generic writing and you're still going to have to go by and customize. Now, that is similar to when you do a beat sheet or an outline, right? You still have to know from start to finish what your script is going to be about. The more details that you're able to feed in, but that is still original story. You still have to come up with the original story, the original idea, right? So I just feel like it's up to the individual person to see how far down they want to go. If you want to churn out mediocre content that will never get Emmy or Oscar nominated, then that's up to you. If that just means you're chasing the almighty dollar, but if you don't want to do that and you really want to customize the content, then yes, I would say utilize AI. And not only that, we don't need to beat up on the individual person because Fortune 500 companies have already implemented this stuff on the back end. So that's what another thing people need to do. They need to do their research. There was an app that I was looking at that even Microsoft had used to build out a logo, and they proudly displayed them on there that they were one of their clients. Another huge like brand like Delta was using it to automate something else. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like people need to stop with this phobia on an individual level and start paying attention on how many companies are implementing it, because that is another thing that we're going to get left behind on, which is especially as minorities, right? If you do a Google search right now, many companies are asking if you have AI experience. So who is that going to leave behind? Those that are not trained up. And usually those that are not trained up is usually minorities like ourselves. They just started doing STEM certifications and, scholarships for minorities and Black people and stuff coming from the hood. They just started that. So, but this business has been out for over a decade, right? So what I'm trying to do is make sure you are caught up with where technology is going, which is why I said we teach AI. So before you put out there negatively in the media space or online, you need to pay attention to what the world is, and you have to adjust accordingly, but do it at your own ethical limits because it's just not. They're not going to be able to reverse it. That's like saying, you know what? We're not doing cars anymore. We're doing skateboards. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think people see it when Netflix kind of knocked out Blockbuster in disbelief at the time, but in reality, I mean, Netflix is still around and they're pretty much a media empire at this point, right?
And let me tell you something, just to let you know with that history as well, Netflix went to Blockbuster and
Yeah.
asked them to buy that technology. And you know what? Blockbuster said, nah, get out of here. We don't, who are you? You know, so they gave them the opportunity to be a part of something that was innovative. And because they didn't have the vision, they got left behind. And eventually got the ocean came and swallowed them up.
Yeah.
Sorry, Blockbuster. I mean, for the few places left, but it's true.
They faded to black really quickly. So I
Yeah.
mean, that kind of I think like I'm so happy that you started your own podcast because I always say like podcast is the epicenter of where we are right now and going because now as an individual
Mhm.
you have the credibility and you have the longevity of a radio station of a TV station that you're building from scratch. So you had an
Mhm.
opportunity to interview like directors, Emmy, Oscar nominated, all these different things. And I listened to a couple of your episodes. And one episode you had Essence on there. So those that don't know who Essence Atkins is, I mean, she goes back to like the Cosby Show back in like the early
Yes.
80s, right? So I want you to kind of like talk about like how are you coming out with a podcast so early as a podcast, which you're getting people that are so mainstream and have been in the game as long as Essence has been like, which is closing in on damn near 40 years.
Yeah, exactly. So one thing that I'm really great at doing is strategy, thinking very strategic, right? Not in a negative kind of way, but I tell people tap into your network first.
Mm.
You know how people always tell you that, tap into your network first, right? So being that I worked at Sony and HBO, there's a lot of colleagues that I still keep in touch with, and some transition over to the creative. So when I was at HBO, we were more on the corporate side. When I was at Sony, we were on the corporate side. So the creative was, across the ocean somewhere. You know what I mean? It's like New York and LA was not as connected, right? So that's the first thing that I did was tap into my network. I reached out to Naima Torres, who is out of Chicago and everything. She's an impact producer out there, amazing woman. We worked at HBO together. I told her about the podcast, and I said I would love to interview you about your journey. Then I have my friend Doug Schaefer, same thing. He was over at Sony with me. He's also a producer. He had just did a film for Sony. I said I would love to interview you for my podcast, right?
Mm.
Now you're looking at two people that have worked for multi-billion dollar brands. You leverage that. You say, listen, I already had Sony and HBO on there. You work over at Paramount. Don't you want to be on the podcast? And then, same thing. Oh, I have Sony, HBO, Paramount. You're at Netflix. Don't you want to be on the podcast? So really tap into your network. Sit down and really think strategic wise, and also make sure your brand is strong.
Mm.
Correct? And your brand is amazing. Boss Uncaged. Y'all see that background? I need to catch up.
Well,
But
I'm hooked. I'm like
it's
literally like a Brooklyn crackhead on a pipe right now when it comes down to like brand strategy and brand development.
oh
So I
my God.
totally feel
Yes.
you 100%, and I definitely agree with you with that, right? So I
Mhm.
want you to kind of like think about this from a standpoint. Somebody's now meeting you for the first time on this podcast, and if you could identify just using 3 to 5 words, what would those 3 to 5 words be to identify you?
You said the 3 to 5 words to identify me if they're asking me about myself.
Yeah, let's say they're meeting you for the first time. Let's say somebody just came in the podcast right now. Somebody is on YouTube and they flipping around and they see what 3 to 5 words like identify you. And just using 3 to 5 words will be the core of what you do, who you are, and what you represent.
I'm a fucking beast. I'm a beast when it comes to business. Do not let this smile fool you. Anybody that has come across me knows that I'm a beast in business. I am very straightforward until I'm not, I'm very calm until I'm not. I tell people that all the time. I will smile. I'm very engaging. I'm very positive and everything, but I also can read bullshit from a mile away,
Mm.
as a Brooklyn person. So if I know that you're trying to manipulate or use, I'll even let you go and hang yourself for some time. I've had people do that. I was working with a producer before, and I slowly but surely just put that string out there. Like he got on the web for about 6 months, and then he just he couldn't understand like how did she catch me on all the BS that I was doing. So it's things that when you're thinking very strategic wise, I think very forward thinking. I look at it as a map, as a pyramid. I'm like, okay, this move. You could even see when I was over at this company called Reliance, the healthcare education, right? I remember going out into the hallway. They had a chalkboard thing or whatever, like with the markers, and I literally put there a schematic on the board of how to implement webinars from start to finish. And that was from after 2 months of talking to absolutely everyone almost in the company, at least ahead of every single department and figuring out all moving pieces. So that's how my brain works, right? So when I'm speaking to people, negotiating, networking, whatever, I'm immediately able to put the pieces together. So yeah, I'm a fucking beast. And I'm also very fearless. I don't think as Black people, we need to be scared to ask what we want. I think sometimes we feel like we are very much inferior to others, and you will not know until you know. And even a no can turn into a yes.
I mean, I think coming out with like the keyword of being a beast. I mean, I think in any industry, you have to be, pretty much aggressive, right? But you have to be
Not
aggressive
aggressive, let's get that
with
straight.
intelligence, not
Yeah,
just
not
flipping,
because they always think we angry about something. No,
yeah,
no, no.
yeah, but I mean, like not taking a no for an answer, right? I mean, like
Yeah,
that's part of okay. Well, you said no once, you didn't say no to this, you said no to that, right? So it's
yeah.
kind of like flipping the coin. Is being more proactive. Usually, people say no because they really don't know or they don't want to take the time. So you kind of have to convince them why you need to have that opportunity to take up some of their time. So I think what you're doing is definitely phenomenal. But where do you see your long-term goals, right? I mean, obviously, right now you're really big into education, you're big into AI, and you're always going to be media driven. But where would you like to see what you're doing at scale 10, 20 years from now?
Oh my goodness, I want to see a slew of projects. Like I look up to Shonda Rhimes.
Mm,
That's one of my very much inspirations, but not, I'm more in the film space and I also love action, adventure, sci-fi, big budget stuff. And I don't see enough of us in that space. So that's why I say you have to be a beast. How else am I going to get to create the number one into genre of TV and film without it? Those are the biggest profitable ones. So the Marvels, the every Tom Cruise film, every Will Smith, Denzel, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars being thrown out there with billions of dollars returned. Look at Dune, opening weekend, 86 million. That thing is probably going to go close to $1 trillion. Did they even expect it? Who knows? But that is where I want to see myself in a space that you do not normally see us. And I also want to see it in a diverse way. I don't want to be put into a cubbyhole
mm,
where you just assume I just want to make all Black content.
mm,
Why can't I make something else? Why can't I make the next, for instance, I wrote a Superman script. Why can't I make the next Superman script? You know, it's just like stop pigeonholing us, and that's what I want. I want them to come to me and say, Vonti, what do you have? And that's what I want. I want to be a producer and a screenwriter. And then when they come to me, I'm able to tap into my network and say, this is what I have. I got this, I got that. That's what I want. And that is actually what I'm building right now. I'm building a dream team.
wow.
I was just on a call with the head of distribution for this one company. And like you mentioned, it was like hearing that no and everything, right? Initially they said no, and they were saying this, that, and the third, but then I read between the lines. I said, oh, so you're not there yet. You're not at that budget. So you're not completely saying no. You're just saying not right now. So let me know if I could support that initiative, anything that you need to build and scale up to that. So
Mm.
don't forget about me as you get your funding. So you're building a team, you're doing this, bring me on as a consultant, whatever. You have to figure out how you fit in versus, oh, I heard no, and I'm gonna go lick my wounds in the corner. When I was young, I used to do that and just be so sad, like, oh, they said no. Oh, my script didn't make it to the finals of the festival.
I think it's funny that you said like younger days, right? I mean, obviously, and I think sci-fi is one of your genres that you like to kind of write in. So like just write this script, right? And I want you to think about it from the telltale sci-fi time travel aspect. If
Hmm.
you had an opportunity to time travel back at any opportunity within your career, when would that be? What would you then have yourself learn from you now to change the outcome of where you are to happen a lot faster?
I would not have taken the role at Sony Pictures right away. So
Mhm.
3 months into that temp job in corporate, they offered me the business analyst position. I should have held out longer. I came in through a staffing agency, and that pigeonholed me to be in corporate for over a decade after. And when I really wanted to be in creative. But unfortunately, at the time, Sony didn't have a program for employees to submit their work, which was so sad. So I could not talk to anybody about my screenwriting without potentially breaking the contract that I had and getting fired. For somebody like me that didn't have family out in LA, that didn't have a spouse or anything, to gamble like that and to potentially get fired, I just didn't want to do that. So I would say that right there is that step that I would have been like, let's change the trajectory. But at the same time, then I think I would have never learned about the corporate side. So it's a catch 22 because now I know what makes me a beast is what a lot of creatives have not seen, which is on the corporate side, where the original funds come from. So we're not talking about, oh, how much are we giving Game of Thrones? It's like, no, no, no. How many TV shows and documentaries are we releasing for the years and how much money are we allocating? Period. Right. So everybody's worried about their horror film. Meanwhile, the heads of studios are like, okay, we're doing 10 horror films, 25 dramas, 15 this, you know what I mean? It's like, and then we're going to spend it in this space, in that space, and with this person, it's like that is a strategy that is happening behind scenes. So it's a catch 22, but I will say I should not have said yes right away after 3 months. I would have loved to have hopped around the studio more to see what would have been an even better fit for me. But I
Wow.
was happy. I was happy. I was like, oh my God, I'm in Sony. Oh my God, they let me in.
Yeah.
I was like,
I
I don't see my people here. Let me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely appreciate that answer, and it kind of goes back to like you being a beast. Most people, like if they're a beast, it's because of trial and tribulations, or they grew up in a household of other beasts, right? And they're
Mhm,
mimicking. So I want you to kind of talk about like your early days. Is it like
mhm.
your mom or your dad? Is that some of where that beast bloodline's coming from, or is this something that you just mutated to on your own?
No, no, no. So my beast mode comes from my grandmother.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I wasn't raised by my mom and dad for a very long time. And by the time I did, it was in my teenage years. So it was my grandmother that raised me from like 9 months old up until I think I was like 12 or 14. And then I moved back to New York. So I grew up in the South, a little town called Rayford, North Carolina, near Fayetteville. I grew up on a dirt road, and my
Hmm.
grandmother would wake us up and we would go and pick peas, lima beans. We would be in the field early morning. She taught me how to be independent as well. And not independent like, the paranoia that we have today on social, like these women want to be independent. It was more about what a man and a woman should be learning, which is how to survive and take care of themselves. So she taught me how to cook, clean, clean the house and everything, hang clothes, just do all of these life lessons. And my personality and goofballness comes from my grandmother for sure.
Wow.
Yeah, so she was an amazing woman. Rest in peace to her. I miss her every day, but she just taught me how to be very firm. She said, nobody owes you anything in this world. So if her friend came and drove her 2 miles down the way, she's either giving you some kind of food or she's giving you some kind of money. That was the first intro to what I consider to be the barter system in my life.
Hmm.
I don't feel like anybody owes me anything, and I try and leverage something. If I can't financially pay you something, I'm going to open up my network or try and introduce you to different people, or if you need something to be done that I'm capable of doing. And that definitely came from my grandmother. Mhm.
I mean, I think it's definitely a solid philosophy, like, give to receive, right? So, I mean, in the education space, I mean, obviously you're giving to receive, but I would think on your journey, there has to have been some kind of, let's say, book or some kind of presence of a book, a landmark book that has sparked your interest to make you a little bit more reliant on the strategy that you're delivering. Do you remember like any of the titles of those books that you would like to recommend?
Do you mean like self-help books or you mean like fictional stuff?
Probably more so in like the nonfiction self-help space. Like obviously you probably learned something from being in corporate, but then you wanted to get some extra information, and then this book was profound in that way.
It was later in the game for sure, but I will say, and it correlates with everything, a book called A Hero's Journey.
Mm.
You learn in screenwriting for sure. And that translates so much to life overall. It's all about the villains and the heroes, right? And like where within that story your journey will continue. So when I seen that, it was just like, oh, okay. I hit some of these beats that they're talking about, similar to like screenwriting. You know, I had a very challenging um childhood growing up, and I was very much unsure about what I wanted to do with myself. There was a lot of villains in my life. You know, I love my grandmother to death, but there was a lot of bad things that did happen to us within that household and everything. And then coming back to New York and that challenge as well, you know, so that was another villain because a country girl with a country accent in their teenage years coming back to Brooklyn trying to survive in the 90s, right? So yeah, so I would say A Hero's Journey is something amazing for any screenwriter to read as well, because it gives you the layout on like where every beat should be and why you're doing the villain versus the hero and sometimes how it intersects as well. Because I
So
do consider myself like that, a villain sometimes, and then the
yeah,
incredible the
yeah,
other
yeah.
time.
Well, I mean, it's yin and yang, right? It's always a equilibrium and a balance in everything. You can't be 100% one versus the other, right? So it has to be a
Mhm.
contradiction of both of them. So I want you to kind of talk to the listener, and let's say the listener right now is on the hero's journey, right? And they're
Mhm.
facing like their first main villain, whatever that villain may be. What words of insight or wisdom do you have for them to help them to overcome that small enemy that they're looking at as a very large beast in front of them currently?
Mm. I would tell them, have you set out your goals? Do you have the short term, long term, and your middle goals? Where is this in the stream that is falling? You know, because there's so many challenges along the way. You have to figure out like, are you that close to your goal, or is this something that's going to devastate you, right? I always say within our lifetimes we always have that thing that is going to change the complete trajectory of our lives, and that is the hardest decision, especially if there's nobody to give you input on it, right? So if you have no outside influence, so if that person is contemplating that, that is what I would say is the thing, is to know where you are within the journey. I know for me, an example would be when I got out of UNCP, I immediately got into UNC Greensboro, but then I also got into the Academy of Art. Greensboro was in North Carolina. That's where I currently was. And it was going to be no kind of money a year. I was considered in state by then, right? The Academy of Art is a private university. It was going to cost me a boatload of money to go there, right? But I felt like I had never been to the West Coast and I needed to challenge myself. I needed to challenge myself. And if I'm going to get in this industry, I need to get on that side of the world. And that was my first intro to the West Coast, right? So I would say, is this going to change the trajectory of your life? And that could be the major factor. Where does this fall within your journey?
Think that's definitely an interesting answer, right? And I mean, obviously, on your journey, you've had not only people to help you and people to mentor you and people to push you down. You've had both superheroes and enemies of the states, right? But I want you to talk about like you have two, I guess, co-heroes that are working with you right now. And if I remember correctly, one of them is Jacob and one is Winston. Like, how did you find them, and what kind of projects are you guys working on currently?
Okay, so Jacob is actually somebody that I went to the Academy of Art with. So I've known him for over a decade, and he's really been amazing. He's been the one for Vonti Talks with Filmmakers as the editor and also like the creative director of the whole podcast. He's come up with the color scheme and all of that stuff. He let me be creative and more engaging as the host and figuring out, you know, the scripting and all that, what questions and you know, how the structure of it was going to look. But as far as the creative, I've definitely handed that over to him. So that's been really amazing as well. He's over in London right now, so he works with a marketing firm that is out there. So Right now, it's just more me again pouring back into him and trying to give him some business over there. I had him introduced to a CMO that I know from a previous company that I was working with. They've met, but I'll always keep trying to push him forward and include him in any projects that I have going on. So right now, me and Jacob, we're still just doing Vonti Talks with filmmakers, the podcast stuff. With Winston Casey, he was the initial co-founder with me of We Teach AI. I had approached him and let him know, I had this idea, like I always do. I had already started doing it with my network, like talking to friends. I had recorded a Zoom and all that stuff. And I was like, look, I'm showing these people these apps, yada, yada. And he had also been doing something similar, except not, wanting to be more behind the scenes. So we combined our forces, came together, but unfortunately he had his own marketing firm, so decided to transition out of it. But I still am so much more passionate about it that I said I'm just going to continue on, even if it's not something that I can really make explode right this moment. I just feel like it's something that's needed for the market. So
So I mean, with that, let's say somebody's listening right now and they're hearing your energy. They may be from Brooklyn right now, like they're
yes,
in the bush, running through
BK
the
all
streets
day.
right now, like they're dying to get in contact with you. Like, where do you want to send them to get to find you? Is it social media, LinkedIn, email?
Oh, they can find me on all of those things. They can follow me. My Instagram is Vonti Pictures, Vonti underscore pictures. You can do info@VontiPictures.com as well. You can find, yeah, you can email and all of that. You can find us on all social channels. We teach AI. You can email me for any kind of AI consultation stuff, something to support your business. That would be Vonti, V as in Victor, ONTI McRae, MCRAE, at weteachai.co. Not the com, because some guy did the com and it
Gotcha.
looks weird and it looks like the Google interface. That ain't us. We teach AI.co. But definitely reach out. I would love any kind of interaction because we're working hard over here, man. We're up to 23 episodes of the podcast. I'm still interviewing. I'm on my way to Vegas. In the next few days, probably when this airs, I'll already be with my first action adventure film or a horror film or something like that. But yeah, that's the way they can reach out.
Hmm. I think earlier you brought up your grandmother and how she influenced you. So, like, this next question is kind of like a variation of that impact that
Mhm.
she had on you, right? I mean, obviously, you've had multiple levels of achievements throughout life, right? Graduating to doing the things that you've done at Sony and HBO and all the other stations that you work for. If
Mhm.
your grandmother was alive today and you had an opportunity to sit down with her, which one of those opportunities would you say would be your greatest that you would want to express to your grandmother today?
Oh man, that's a hard one, man. That is a real hard one. Um, it would definitely probably be the HBO stuff. I remember when I was young, we actually had that channel. I mean, we had the floor model wooden TV that was 1,000 pounds heavy. And my grandmother was the one that really got me into TV. From the Honeymooners to Shaka Zulu that used to come on that mini series. She got me into The Young and the Restless. Like we used to just watch TV with her all of the time. So I think she would be most proud of me being in the entertainment space and then also giving back to the community as far as like the educational side of things as well, including like, the podcast plus even the software stuff. So I think she would just be proud that I went from a very shy young girl that used to stare at the ground to somebody that's very outgoing and just really here to try and help.
Wow. I think you brought me back into like a serious flashback with like UHF dials turning on the TV
Yeah.
and you have to find and sometimes you try to get right in between the stations. Yeah, like we just dated ourselves unfortunately, but we kind of put ourselves in that bracket. We're not antiques as of yet, but we're starting to get a little pewter. Just kind of coming.
And I know, man, it's crazy because we both had the same similar journey, like health issues from, the industries that we have worked in, just working ourselves almost into a grave. And
Yep.
and that's one thing that I think nowadays that I try and promote is just self-care. Mental self-care, remove the toxic from your life. people, I don't care, family, friends, whatever, if they are there to rip you down or not pouring positivity in you, stop giving them access to you because that will put you in a very fast grave. And I'll tell you one thing, naps are my best friend. I don't care what nobody say. I can be in an MRI machine and that shit could be going da 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 da, da and I'm in there knocked out, snoring, man. I don't care. They was like, "Miss, are you okay?" And I'm like, "What?"
Hilarious.
Don't
Hilarious.
care.
I
I
mean,
know I'm a goofball. I'm sorry.
no, it's funny. I mean, on the spectrum of humor, I think I remember reading one of your posts, and it kind of brings me to I think you're undercover foodie. Like you haven't pronounced it, but I want you to talk about the damn sweet pie, the sweet potato pie of yours that has to be shipped and mailed out. Like, what's so spectacular about this damn sweet potato pie? And my second question is, when am I getting a slice of that?
You can get on the mailing list, man. No, so my grandmother, that's my grandmother's recipe. That was one thing that I told you, she taught us how to cook and everything. I used to watch her make cakes from scratch. She used to make sweet potato pie, cornbread, all of that stuff. And my most favorite moment was cooking for her as she got older, like when she was getting closer to 80 and everything, and her saying, "Wow, this tastes good." And I just knew I had arrived, bro. So like once it was one of her favorite dishes and she said I did it, I was like, this recipe ain't never changing. So yeah, sweet potato pies is like one of my top dishes along with Thanksgiving dinners. I've done the whole shebang, man. So your homegirl knows how to cook. Guys, if you're watching, I'm single and I'm from the South in Brooklyn. Okay, know how to cook. I take care of myself, but I want no narcissist. Okay,
Yeah,
because
I mean,
I told
that's
you
a
I'm
hell
a
of a
fucking beast,
combination.
and
That's a
I'll
hell of a
see.
combination.
Yeah,
Brooklyn and Dirty Dirty at the same time. But when you
yeah,
speak about yeah, that's
man.
a that's a
Well,
definitely
I
a hell
will
of a
say,
combination.
going back to this whole conversation, right? Do not hesitate to be yourself in this space. If they cannot handle it, you are in the wrong space. That's it. I remember going to HBO, people were buttoned up. We come in with our suits and everything, and I would roll in there with my afro. I don't care. This is my natural hair. Before anybody ever said it was okay to do, I just was myself. I would come in with hair like this or whatever. It just didn't matter. I would come in suited and booted, but myself. And I would speak eloquently like myself. I feel like I have the street smarts, but also the book smarts. And I don't let people intimidate me. I don't care what rank you are. I've spoken to CEOs, presidents. I've gone, C-suite exec. It doesn't matter to me, all the way down to the janitor. I feel like as long as you are being respected, those are the spaces you continue to be in. Anywhere else is uncivilized.
I think that's an interesting like leading me into like my last question, right?
Yes,
And
sir.
I think it's going to be your answer could be very interesting considering like your background. If you had an opportunity to spend 24 hours with anyone and that person would be able to mentor you for those 24 hours, that
Mm,
person could be someone from your past, someone that you never met, someone that was born and died before you were even born. Who would
mm.
that person be and why?
Oh man. Dang, that's a hard one, man. It's a lot of people on this journey that were like involuntary mentors.
Mm,
They didn't even know they were mentors. I just recruited them. Rich knows, but the other ones, not really. Man, oh man, 24 hours. Let me see. Dang, that's a hard one, man. I might have to come back to that one. It's so many great people that I met on this journey, dang, that's a hard one. That is really hard.
mm,
I've met like I remember Robert Ziegler over at Sony Pictures. The first day that I met him on my very first day, he said, "Hi, Vonti McRae, how are you?" Had no idea who the hell he was, but he was literally the VP of our entire department. He
mm.
knew my first and last name, and that was on my first day. That right there gave me so much respect for him because I'm like, you care enough about every single person on your team that you would get to know their name. You've been to those places where you're just like you float in, they pretend like you're not even there. So an executive like that, wow, that's crazy. I was saying 24 hours, God. Oof, is it a celebrity or like,
Could be anyone.
God, I would probably want to sit down with Shonda Rhimes.
Mm.
I know that she used to be an intern for Denzel Washington. I just love her whole strategy. I think like she had a showrunner or something from Grey's Anatomy do, she gave them responsibility of one of her shows. No, I think it was an employee of hers from Grey's Anatomy that was at a lower level. She made them the showrunner of another series
Mm.
that literally, you know, so I'm like, she's a beast. I don't feel like that woman has gotten enough recognition, and it's very sad to me. You know, we talk about the P. Diddy's and the Russell Simmons and the Jay-Z's and all these Tyler Perry's and all that, but I'm like, I don't feel like our community has really rallied around Shonda Rhimes like they should. What she's done in prime time, you're talking billions of dollars of commercial advertising. These channels are not, and that's what I think people don't understand, the strategy of broadcast, right? When you see that NFL commercial, they've spent millions of dollars because of the impressions, right? So if you say 100 million people have watched the NFL and even 2 million of them go and buy your product for $5, that's a profit, right? So them spending 1 to 2 million. So for them to give Shonda Rhimes that kind of access during prime time, and she would go from like 8 p.m. to like 11 p.m. for one network, that was a beast move. I don't even know how you negotiate that. So that's why I would probably want to talk to her.
I mean, yeah, I could definitely see that. 'Cause I mean, when she was at her peak with Grey's Anatomy, she also had private practice as well, and they were consecutive shows. So she had like that entire lineup.
And then Scandal, remember? She
Yeah,
had
yeah,
Scandal, like it was like, and then they rotated. Oh, okay, Scandal's over. Okay, let's put another one of How Do I Get Away with Murder? You know what I mean? So it's kind of
yeah,
like, how do you pitch to stay locked in for that for over a decade? Pretty much almost 2 decades, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah. It's
And
closing
now
around
she,
20 years.
yeah, and now she's over at Netflix killing that as well.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with you with that. I mean,
Yeah,
she's kind of like a household name, but an unkept secret as well. So I feel that for sure.
yeah.
So going into close, I mean, you're a fellow podcaster, and I love interviewing fellow podcasters because when I give them the opportunity to become the host of the Boss Cage podcast, they know exactly what to do. So now my show is your show, and I'm your guest. What questions do you have for me?
Yes. Thank you for turning it over to me. Well, similar to what you said to me, how I always start is for you to tell us about your journey and how long have you been in what you're doing.
I say I've been in this journey for, if I really look at it from the start, I think the first time I learned and understood what graffiti was, and I grabbed
Mm.
that first piece of sandpaper and you know did something illegal and scratched it on the D line train. It was essentially me becoming who I am today. I mean, it's essentially the same thing if you think about it. It's about getting up. It's about showcasing whatever your art form is and having people see it. Sounds a lot like media to me if you think about it from that standpoint. So I would say like that was the dawn, and I didn't realize that until damn near 25 years later. Like you know you just have it in you and you just do things but you don't really realize like that was really the dawn of me becoming a podcaster or influencer or heavily into media.
Mhm. And so when you say those things though, like what keeps you continuing to work on this? Like what was your most successful thing that you knew? I'm a professional at this and I got this.
I think for me it's more so, you know, obviously I have systems, I have automations, all that stuff behind the scenes, and I'm not going to say I'm better or worse than any other podcaster, but behind the scenes, the podcasting system is done very tightly. So it gives me an opportunity to do what I'm really good at, which is doing my due diligence with whoever I'm interviewing and doing the research and keeping all that data points in my head during the interview. Like, you know, bringing up like your sweet potato pie, I
Yeah.
found that on a random thing on a random page, and I kept
Yeah.
it in my memory for the time when we have opportunity to talk about it.
Mhm.
That's where I think I shine the best.
That is absolutely true, man. And I do love how you have branded yourself. You know, can you speak to the audience on, different techniques that you're using, maybe the top two, and why that is so important when you're branding yourself?
I think you know most people say that you know you don't buy from a brand, you buy from an individual, and that's why I always say there's multiple different types of brand. There's a company brand, there's a product brand, a service brand, and a personal brand. And if you do it correctly in an ecosystem and you bring all the brands together equally, then If you hear S.A. Grant, you think Boston Cage, you think Boston Cage, you think S.A. Grant, you think podcast. All these things should just be cohesive. It should never just be one thing. And ideally, there's billion-dollar companies like Nike that are doing one thing, but if they
Mhm.
were to come out with a brand new Nike today, they would not be able to do what they did back then. If you look at Kanye, right? If you look at Yeezy, that's why he was able to compete because he used his personal brand to now leverage the new product brand. So ideally, there's old systems, there's new systems, and you have to figure out how to combine both of them and make them work for you. And the first step is showcasing and talking and telling people about your brand at every single facet you possibly can.
I love that. And you are absolutely right, man. And speaking of, I know me and you connected before on the technology side of things. Let's speak more on how do you incorporate AI into your brand.
Yeah, so I mean, it's to the point to where I have this conversation with my wife. I'm like, okay, basically based upon society, men are going to die before women. So, being that you're going to outlive me, technically, technically, I want you to upload me to the fucking cloud. Right? And in today's world, we have the capabilities to where some fragmentation of who I am today can essentially be up there. I mean, I have my own digital avatars right now. I have my voice already cloned right now. So I can create content at scale and it not even be me. It has my mannerisms, it has my eye movements. It looks like it's twitching just like I'm twitching right now, but it's not me. So ideally, when that time comes, what would it look like 10 years down the road when AI catches up and the technology catches up? Technically speaking, who I am as an essence should be able to be uploaded to the cloud and live forever. And that way, think about Steve Jobs if he was still around.
Yeah.
Think about, you know, the Waltons if they were still around. Think about the Rockefellers if they were still around. Like all these opportunities that we lost, those industry legends. Now in today's world, if you do not understand how to magnify and leverage AI to make who you are and your brand essentially live forever, you're doing your family and everyone else a complete disservice. I mean, think about it. If Steve Jobs was still here today, where would Apple really be? And
Yeah.
they're top dogs, but where would they really be if Steve was still behind them?
He probably innovate and do something like Elon Musk, who is like, oh, I'm starting with the EV, but now look, SpaceX and all these freaking, all these satellites and everything that's like covering the whole freaking earth. So it's kind of like if Tesla was to go under tomorrow, he still has $1 trillion business. And if Tesla was the fold, he'd probably do something else. Now, let me ask you though, with your wife, would you require her for to still have your avatar right next to her while she's laying down in bed?
I told her, I mean, be free to be you, but at the same time, like I may, send you a random text message because again, it'll be me, right? So I want you to think about that. It will be my personality as it is at the day of death, living on from that period on. So I mean, imagine my grandkids. I mean, imagine if we had that opportunity with our great grandfathers or grandmothers before us. Your grandmother passed away, but you still have an opportunity to leverage who she is today and speak to her and her mannerisms and her tonality and her education of where she was. And again, you're in the cloud, so technically speaking, you know fucking everything. You're connected to everything. So the reality is, it's kind of like you are even upgrading who you were to a whole nother level.
It's a catch-22 on that one though, because I really don't like when they know everything. Like where there's cameras everywhere around the world now, especially in Europe, where they're like filming everything everywhere you move and all that stuff. It's like no more personal space, and it's such an invasion, especially when on your cell phone, right? When you didn't even give privacy permissions, right? But all of a sudden you're looking up on Amazon about a t-shirt, and then the next thing you know, you're going on TMZ and that same t-shirt is over there on there. You know what I mean? Or like you're speaking about something verbally to a friend in the car, and then the next thing you're looking on the internet, and that is literally
Yeah.
on your phone. So it's a catch-22, though. But how have you been able to, aside from like the avatar stuff and everything, how have you been able to draw on AI for like your products? Because I know that we mentioned before with your children's books, and I love that as well with the creative stuff. So could you speak more to that?
Yeah. So, for example, this book, for people that don't know, I had an opportunity to test AI and I created this book in 4 days, written the book 100% using AI, leveraging AI because I've been training AI to speak and understand who Boston Cage is and who S.A. Grant is. So it really knows me to a certain extent. It has my tonality. And then at
Mhm.
the same time, I started to put information about like my son and his grandfathers, right? And then obviously it knows all about Boston Cage, the podcast. So it was just a matter of me putting in the right prompts. And if you don't really understand prompt engineering, that is the real secret to AI. It's understanding how to talk to AI and get the results that you want. So that was the context. And then taking that same philosophy, well, think about it. If I want, people always saying the images look different, images look different.
Mhm.
If you tell AI, I'm looking for a 7-year-old um, multiracial, curly hair kid that is 5'2" with a red shirt, brown
Mhm.
shoes, and you tell that every single time, and the only thing that you change is that now this kid is sitting down, or now
Yeah.
this kid is on a basketball court, or now you would be surprised how close those images can be. And this book is an example of that. Like all the images in here, technically speaking, if you were to analyze them, they're different kids.
Yeah.
Collectively from the outside in looking in, the similarity of the traits are so close that it looks like the same kid throughout the entire book or all the other books that we're going to do in our series.
Hmm. And I don't mind that though, because like I said, again, people are not realizing multi-billion-dollar companies are using this. Like Canva now has an AI function that does
Yes.
that. You know what I mean? Adobe has just launched something. Even Google with the Gemini, whatever stuff that they have going. So again, it's not going to be reversed. So I do love that you are um leveraging that to put out products. What I would love for you to do more of, though, aside from the prompts, is customize the writing. As a screenwriter, that is one thing that is important to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I would never, change that. I would never want to see an entertainment lawyer now all of a sudden churn out 10, 15 scripts and cut out screenwriters. I wouldn't want that because it's not really original story, right? You're
Yeah.
just churning content. So that would be my only critique of what you're doing is, just look to do a deeper dive, even if it's an outline or something, really think on who that character is and make sure
Oh, yeah.
you're inputting that when you're talking about the words and inspiration as well. So you're saying like, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
listen, we're inspiring each other. And speaking of that, right? Who was an inspiration for you growing up?
Wow. I think that that's kind of like a difficult thing, man. I was kind of lost in a storm at particular times in my adolescence, but I would think probably more so musicians or like hip hop artists. Like I was, believe it or not, like the biggest influence for who I am right now stems from RZA from the Wu Tang.
Yes.
Period.
Shame on you when we stepped into.
And obviously like by daytime I was ODB, but by night
Yeah,
it
man.
was RZA, right? So it was this
Yeah.
kind of like this duality between seeing what they were doing and how they were leveraging it. But the more and more I learned about RZA and how much of a mastermind he really is behind the scenes, and just the way he had set up the Wu Tang with the diversification in multiple different studios, and he wanted each artist to have their own individual contracts and then also have a mass agreement with Wu Tang. That shit was not only phenomenal, but they were like the real first to really do it and leverage it at scale.
Mm. And do you still follow the music industry a lot? Or is it like do you know about the controversy with songwriters and the publishing portion?
To a certain extent. I mean, I think I'm a little bit more diversified into the space of
Yeah.
more education and more so like TV and movies. Because that's more of the space that I'm going. I think that's how you and I got connected because through my
Yes.
networking, I was saying like, if you're going to introduce me to anyone, if they're talking about TV, they're talking about being a producer, they're talking about writing, introduce me. Otherwise, I don't want to meet them. The only people I want to meet.
Exactly. Which I'm still waiting on this guy to pitch me something. He hasn't really said much of anything. He just mentioned that is in his space and everything. So we will be talking offline on what kind of content you would like to get developed. But what is your favorite genre? I do believe it's the same as mine, or no?
You talking about as far as movies go?
Yeah, as far as movies, is it the genre of action
I mean,
adventure?
I think it's a hybrid. I mean, it's a hybrid between sci-fi, of course. I think sci-fi and technology driven, but at the same time, it has to have like an element of like thrillers to it. They have to be kind of like a little bit more edgy. And the thing I'm really looking at right now that I want to watch multiple times is the new Adam Sandler Netflix. But it's kind of it's he's a comedian, but he kind of reminds me of the dark comedy side of things. But it
Hmm.
has this whole space thing, and it's kind of like watching without ruining the context of it, just watching how that unfolds and how the viewing public perceives it because they've known him for being the water boy, right? He's
Mhm.
always
Yeah.
been like the hysterical guy. So for him to stand up in drama is a little bit more difficult to swallow.
Yeah. Which is really dope. So would it something like Minority Report interest
Oh,
you?
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, stuff
that's
like
not one
that.
of my favorites. I mean, if I have to name my favorite movie of all time as far as in that
Oh,
genre, it'll
don't
be
ask me that.
1998 Matrix, period.
Oh, the Matrix, of course. 98 Matrix, yeah.
98
But
Matrix.
you can't ask me that because I'm a filmmaker, I've watched thousands,
Mm,
thousands of things. Like it's very hard to give top five films of anything. Like you said, it would have
right.
to be within a genre. And even then, I'm still going to go down the rabbit hole. I will say what started me on this journey was Jurassic Park, though,
Mm,
or
mm.
for actually wanting to write film. When I that was my first time. Yeah, yeah,
I
that
think
the original Jurassic Park film.
I don't think
Dolby
I really
surround sound.
fell in love with
Huh?
movies. I don't think I really fell in love with movies until I got into foreign films, like Amelie, City of the Lost Children, Run Lola Run, and I was like,
Ooh.
German movies are that good, French movies are that good, and it was like their colors and the cinematography was a completely different characteristics of U.S. films, and that's when I was just like, there's a whole nother genre, another world that's out there that most Western culture they're missing out on those opportunities.
I know. I feel like now, unfortunately, in the space of filmmaking,
Mm,
and when it comes to like action, adventure, it's like such a dark
mm.
thing. Like everything is like yellow and brown washed, and the characters seem like they're on drugs or something. I'm like, where's the explosion of color? That is these faces. I don't know. I'm feeling like they just got tired of the superhero film that is like aqua blues and greens, and now everything is just dull. And it looks like people are on drugs, like seriously, but they're supposed to be a
Yeah.
superhero.
But it's Western. I mean, it's Western style. Because to your point, if you're looking at European-based films, the color theory and the color palettes are extremely saturated. Like the
Mhm.
colors pop. You can see a rose in the background, and you're like on a bicycle riding down the street doing like 30 miles per hour, but you would notice that rose just because of the color. Versus to your point, it's so funny. Like a lot of the TVs, if they're not really backlit that well, and you're watching something during the daytime, you can't
Mhm.
watch you got I literally, you know how many movies I've turned off during the day and I was like, I'll watch it at night when it's dark so I can actually see what's going on.
Yes, yes, and it's like you just pressing the button. Like, let me make this lighter and lighter and
That's
lighter. It's like you done ruined the entire freaking thing. And I'll say it right now, and then I'm gonna ask you one more question, but then I gotta go. Um, the new Dune. I watched the first one. I was like, oh, because I'm like, did y'all go above and beyond? Like Sting was in the first one. You're talking about Sting was like higher than the Justin Bieber of our time right now. And he was in the first original Dune. They had amazing costumes, they had amazing special effects. The writing was amazing. Everything about it was so forward thinking. And then I saw this last one, the very first Dune, and I'm like, it's not even matching up to the original. Not matching up like lingo wise, but just like action, the emotions that you felt. It was like too many quiet moments on the desert and sitting in rooms made of stone that was brown, having conversations. And I was just like, mm. So I'm hopeful the second one is going to do it for me. But that first Dune, I still watch it to this day. I probably watched that film at least 50 times. And I get it. People don't remember the original one, but if you get a chance, definitely go watch the original one. Definitely watch the original one. That's like them doing Platoon over and fucking it up.
wow.
Yeah.
I'll take note of that. So
Yeah.
you had one last question for me.
You mentioned aside from the avatar stuff, right? Where do you see your brand in the next 10 years? I think you said for me, 5 to 10. I would love to ask you the same question because I think it's important. People need to know we have long-term goals.
Yeah, I mean, I think, anytime you start anything new, it can be profitable year one, you can make capital, but you really don't seal the deal until year five. So we're coming up on our year five within the next 12 months. And
Mhm.
to your point, where we're going to be after year five until year 15 and so forth, we're going to be an international education slash entertainment platform. which
Yeah.
essentially we're talking about podcasts, we're talking about TV, we're talking about academies, we're talking about all the things that I've been showcasing elements of. And a lot of times people are probably shaking their head is like, how the hell is he doing all this? Well, the reality is having a strong infrastructure, having a great team, and leveraging the living shit out of AI on a day-to-day basis is how I'm able to do what I'm doing. But in the next 5 to 6 years, I think we're going to be more so on an international playing field. I mean, imagine all the content that you see me creating right now today being redistributed in multiple languages, not one, not a dozen, but just say like 60 languages at scale, which we can do today if you can think about that.
Yeah, dude, you're talking to the person that worked on Game of Thrones the entire series. We did that translation and subtitles for every freaking country around the world and built out 1 million units of it for every single retailer you could think of. So yeah, I do feel like you can get there. And I love that your not imagination, but your ideas for the future of your business is just that scaled and just that large, because I feel like we need to stop limiting ourselves. That's one thing. I do not compare myself to another producer or a production company or anything, right? I'm going out to Vegas right now to go and work with a wonderful woman that's like an Emmy nominated producer. I'm not Emmy nominated, but they see that my brand is strong enough. They know that I know my stuff and they're willing to work with me, right? I don't compare myself to anybody. I compare myself to Vonti. So that's why I see Boston Uncaged and SA Grant. I see you as the same thing. You're not comparing yourself. And I'm not, I'm not trying. I always tell people I ain't trying to Tyler Perry this shit. I'm
Hell
not.
no. Hell no.
I
There's,
don't
there's
want to
only
be
one
in that
Tyler,
lane.
man.
Yeah.
There's only
Nothing
one.
wrong with him, but I just don't want to be in that lane. I want to be myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, ending the podcast on that note, it kind of goes into like the initials of Boss and Cage, and I was just like, be you. I mean, if you ever think about it, every aspect of what I've been doing, there's been secret messages for a long time. And so if you think about the initials of being you and be yourself, that's what Boss and Cage really is all about. So
Yeah.
if you're listening right now, going back to what the actual boss herself, the filmmaker boss said, it's just
Ah,
you. Be natural, be yourself, and that way you don't have to fake the funk in front of the cameras and be split personalities. And I mean, you could be split personality disorders, but if that's really you on a regular basis.
that is so dope. And you know what? If you think about that, Brooklyn, me and you combined, if we scrambled those letters, it's almost like FUBU, bro.
Fact. Like literally, if you think
Like
about it,
literally like FUBU, bro.
the thing is, Fubu was started by a dude that was raised up in Queens that was from Trinidad. So I mean, it's not too far fetched, right? I mean, it's
It's not too far back. I'm Black American though, but it ain't too far fetched. Listen, get in how you get in, then. Get in how you fit in. And that's another thing. And I wish we could have talked more about that. Me as a Black American filmmaker, yo, because it's that's a limitation within itself. So we'll talk about that on another episode. But
yeah.
I really appreciate you having me here, man. It's been amazing.
Well, the pleasure is definitely mine, and I think it goes without saying. I think this is probably not gonna be the last episode. And I was just talking with my wife before the show, and I was like, I think like I finally found someone that I really want to co-host something with. I don't know what the topic matter would be, but I know for a fact that you and I could definitely scramble some eggs and bake some damn cakes if we sat down and came up with a concept and then ran with it.
And you know what? We're gonna have some bomb ass AI avatars, bitch. Yes. Brooklyn's in the house. Yo, maybe
Without
we
a
can
doubt.
get RZA from Wu-Tang to freaking do the intro song, bro. That would be dope. Listen, RZA, if you're listening to this,
Facts.
Brooklyn, son. Brooklyn is in the house. We're asking for you, bro.
100% facts. 100% facts. Like I can see it happening for sure, but I know you got to hit the road, and so I definitely have a safe trip. Again, I appreciate you being on the show today. I think you dropped enough nuggets of gold to make leprechauns chase after it for sure.
I love that. I love that. All right, man. You have a good day too, man.
Have a good one.
Bye.
S.A. Grant over and out.
All right, over and out.